London once gave her a title she never asked for, the most arrested woman in the city. Her name was Jane Cakebread, and for years that phrase followed her through the papers, through the streets, through every cold doorway where she tried to rest. The words sounded almost comic in print, but the life behind them was anything but. To understand who Jane really was and how her life led her there, we need to walk with her, not as a headline but as a person, from the small town where she was born, through the rooms where she worked, to the pavements where she fell, and the ward where her story finally ended. Jane's life began far from the noise of London, in a small town in Hertfordshire. Her family lived by their hands and by whatever work could be found. Her father was a laborer, the kind of man whose strength was his trade. Her mother kept the home, taking small jobs when she could, sewing, washing, mending, anything that brought in a few coins to help feed the children. Among the few official lines that survive from her early years, one word stands out: scholar. It means that for at least a time Jane went to school. She sat at a wooden desk with a slate and chalk. She traced letters, copied short sentences, learned to read simple books. For a working family, even that little bit of schooling meant something. It said there was hope that one child might have a steadier life, though everyone knew it could end at any time. For many girls like Jane, the day came when they were old enough to be useful elsewhere, and that meant leaving home. She packed what little she had and took the road to London. It was what thousands of young women did then. The city was hungry for servants. A servant's life meant long days and longer nights. You woke before the family, slept after them, obeyed every bell and every rule. There were rules for how to lay a fire, how to fold a shirt, how to polish brass. If you did well, you stayed. If you made a mistake, you might find your small box waiting on the step by morning and your name struck off the household register. Still, it was steady work, a bed in the attic, meals, and a wage, however small. Records show Jane's name in more than one London household, which means she could hold a position, follow a routine, earn her living. For a while she had a roof and a rhythm, but service was fragile. If you got sick, if your mistress lost patience, if a plate broke or a word was spoken out of turn, your place could vanish overnight. There were no savings, no family nearby to fall back on. You might find yourself walking the streets with a bundle in your arms, searching for a registry office, hoping for the next post. And when that search failed, there was only one door left: the workhouse. The workhouse was meant as a refuge, but also as a warning. The boards who ran them believed they should give help without making life too easy, so the conditions were deliberately harsh. Families were separated, men to one side, women to another, children in their own ward. The food was plain, the dress identical, the routine strict. You went there when you had nowhere else to go, to keep from starving, to keep from freezing, and then, as soon as you could, you were pushed back out to try again. Jane's name appears in the ledgers of these places more than once. Each entry is brief: a name, an age, a trade, a reason for admission. Her trade was usually listed as laundress. It tells us what kind of work she could still find when service was gone. Laundry work was hard. You hauled wet linen from tub to mangle, from mangle to line. The steam scalded your hands. The cold cracked your skin, your back bent under weight, your chest filled with damp air. Some washhouses let women sleep under the tables if they agreed to start before dawn. It was a life lived day to day, and one bad week meant hunger. One bad month meant the streets. And it was on those streets that the story London would remember began. The first time Jane's name appears in the police books, the charge was drunk and disorderly. It was the same for many women who had fallen out of service. Drink was easy to find and cheap. It warmed the body, softened the noise in the head, gave courage in a city that otherwise gave none. But once you were known to drink in public, you drew the constable's eye. The charges repeat across the years: drunk and incapable, obscene language, assault on the police. In truth, these were small things. An argument outside a public house, a shout at a passerby, a scuffle when an officer tried to move her on. Yet each one earned a fine or a few days inside. If she couldn't pay, when she usually couldn't, she went to the cells. The pattern hardened. Out, arrested, fined, inside again, and out once more. The same places appear in the reports: Oxford Street, Regent Street, Hanover Square, Holborn, the Strand, the heart of the city where the crowds were thick and the lights bright. The police patrolled those spaces heavily. Any disturbance was noticed. And Jane by then was noticed often. People sometimes ask, why did she drink? The truth is, the records don't say, but it isn't hard to imagine. Drink dulled pain. It made a cold night bearable. It made a lonely hour pass. It was one of the few things a poor woman could reach for to feel some relief. But it was also a trap, one that the city itself helped to set. Each arrest made the next one more likely. A woman known to the police could not hide. Her face was familiar. Her name was marked. Each fine she couldn't pay led to a short sentence, and each short sentence snapped the few threads that tied her to any bit of work or lodging she had left. You can't keep a job when you vanish for a week. You can't keep a bed when you don't come back to pay for it. The prisons she knew were close to the courts, places like the House of Correction at Cold Bath Fields. They were not built to reform. They were built to keep order. Inside, the days were silent and hard. Wake early, wash, work, eat in silence, lights out. A week inside might keep you sober, but it also erased your small foothold outside. When you stepped through the gate again, you were a stranger, even in your own street. The courts also used what they called bonds to keep the peace. They told you to promise good behavior, and if you broke it, you owed money. But for people with nothing, the bond meant nothing. They couldn't pay, so they went inside again. The punishment became a circle with no exit. After enough of these cases, the system gave her a new label: Habitual Drunkard. The police kept a special register for people with repeated drink offenses. They wrote down names, descriptions, and places of arrest. Then they sent lists to publicans, warning them not to serve those people again. In some districts, serving a listed person could even cost a landlord a fine. That meant Jane's face became known everywhere. A cold shoulder followed her from door to door. A pub wasn't just a place to drink. It was a place to sit, to warm up, to meet people, sometimes even to find small jobs. When those doors closed, the street was all that was left, and in the street the police were always watching. Her age shifts from record to record, sometimes older, sometimes younger. That was common. Clerks guessed. Enumerators wrote what they thought they heard. But whether she was 35 or 55 on paper, the outline of her life is clear. A child from a laboring family, a young woman in service, a laundress after that, and finally, a familiar face in the police courts. She walked the same circuit of the city, the bright shop fronts of the West End, the narrow lanes behind them, the markets to the east, the older courts near Clerkenwell. When she was ill, she went back to the workhouse infirmary. When she was well enough, they sent her out again. The system she lived under wasn't built to change lives. The courts handled small disorder. The prisons enforced silence. The workhouses fed and separated the poor. The infirmaries patched the sick and sent them out once they could stand. Each place did its narrow job. None were meant to stop someone like Jane from falling again. So what was an ordinary day like for her when she wasn't in court? Imagine this. She wakes in a lodging house if she could afford it, or in a wash house if she'd worked late, or on a bench if she hadn't. If she has work, she scrubs linen until her hands ache. If not, she walks the yards and back doors looking for someone who needs an extra pair of hands. If she earns a few coins, she eats. If she has a few more, she pays for a bed. If she has none, she walks until the constable tells her to move along. That was her loop. Not a moral tale, just a schedule repeated through years. The newspapers loved her story. A woman arrested again and again made easy copy. A few lines of amusement or pity for the breakfast reader. It filled space in the column and cost nothing to print. So Jane became a character, the most arrested woman in London. The name made people laugh, but it also hit her. It turned a human life into a running joke. The truth was harder. Years of labor and cold had worn her down. The records from the infirmaries list the same diagnoses over and over. Weakness, chronic bronchitis, debility, alcohol. The doctors did what they could, a bed, broth, rest. But you can't fix a lifetime of strain with a few days of warmth. When she was strong enough to walk, she was sent out, and when she fell again, she came back. Finally, one day, she didn't leave. The last line in her story is quiet. She died in care, her heart and lungs worn out, alcohol noted among the causes. It was a common ending for lives like hers. But common doesn't mean small. So what can her story tell us now? It shows how thin the edge was between survival and collapse. A servant's job lost, a day's work missed, a bed unpaid. Each small thing pushed her closer to the street. It shows how the city's systems and the courts, the prisons, the workhouses were built to contain, not to heal. They kept order, yes, but they offered no bridge back. If even one piece of that bridge had existed, a stable bed, a steady job, a place that treated drinking as illness instead of crime, Jane's path might have changed. But those things didn't exist for poor women alone. And maybe that's the hardest truth. People said she chose her life. But choice only matters when there are real options. For someone like Jane, the choices were an alley, a cell, a ward, or the street. The city called that freedom. It was really just the space between punishments. When she died, her name still appeared in print. The papers called her notorious, as if notoriety were her legacy. But if you step closer, you can see something different. You can see a woman who worked, who tried, who fell again and again in a system that never caught her, a system that saw her only when she caused a scene and forgot her the rest of the time. Jane Cakebread's story isn't about vice or shame. It's about how a city deals with the people it doesn't know what to do with. It's about how easy it is to lose a place in the world, and how hard it is to find one again. If you remember anything of her, let it be this. She was not the headline the papers wrote. She was a life, worn down by work and weather and loneliness, who needed rest and help, and found neither. And if you ever walk down the same streets where she once stood, Oxford Street, Regent Street, the Strand, remember that beneath the noise of the crowd and the light of the shops, there are still people trying to hold on one day at a time, just as she did.